So hi, and welcome to the second episode of ChatNChew with my special guest, my friend Kyle Mole. And today we're going to be talking about what your role-playing character says about you as a person, the choices that you make, good or evil, and so on and so forth. Right off the bat, I put together a little montage of different games that kind of talk about our fascination with darkness and with the more evil side of things. Like, I think I've got like the Darkness video game in there, and like a great example is like Fable and KOTOR, which kind of Knights of the Old Republic, for those of you who don't know. They kind of give you that choice of, you know, who will you be? Will you be the villain or will you be the hero, kind of thing. So we'll take a break and take a look at that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. Okay, so welcome back. We're snacking on nachos today, homemade. So
cheers.
Cheers. So Kyle, this was your choice. You wanted to talk about this, and as a DM, I've had this brought up by other DMs as well. They're like, what do you think it says about somebody who, you know, wants to play the evil necromancer? So I guess we'll talk about that first, and then I'd like to finish up by talking about how you think that affects like game dynamics. Does it change the kind of game that you have? Mm-hmm. But let's start with what you want to talk about.
Well, we jump right in with the necromancer. It's in a lot of editions, and you see the ability to raise the dead and have this horde of players behind you. You see it in Diablo, which is a dark game, but you still raise the corpses to fight the greater evil. And that's one aspect of the entire thing. You can fight a greater evil with evil, fight fire with fire, kind of an idea.
That's kind of an anti-hero kind of thing, as opposed to, say, just the straight out evil game, where you have, you know, you're playing the orc barbarian who's, you know, raising the village or that kind of thing. Because the one you're talking about, you can almost, I think, you can almost kind of justify.
Yep.
Like you said, fighting fire with fire. You know, even Batman technically is, you know, vigilante, but he's doing it for good reasons.
Exactly.
So.
Well, morality in D&D is like, you take it. The perspective is different, because here we are in the real world, and our actions, we're held accountable for our actions. In D&D, we're not held accountable for our character's actions.
Right.
Except through the Dungeon Master.
Right.
So if you have this no restrictions mentality, it breaks the bonds of the social contract. And you have the opportunity to do the evil things. And the question, I think, is whether or not doing evil acts in a game bears upon the real evil.
Well, yeah. Do you think that people are making those choices because that social contract has been kind of suspended, and is it them simply indulging their alter ego, things that they would not normally do? And if so, what does that say about the individual? Is there an implication that there's something darker within, or is it just harmless fun, a way of releasing that so that it doesn't spill out?
Well, I'd like to suggest, I'm just reminded of something irrelevant, but D&D is effectively meant to be an escape from reality. I mean, we are not spellcasters. We are not the big hulking sword swinging hero.
Right.
Unless we're Tyrone.
Another friend of ours.
And in that sense, with the combination of the loss of the social contract and the escape from reality, there's really no consequences to being the evil demigod or the lich,
right,
or that sort of dark entity.
Don't you think that, I mean, yes, the appeal of that is I would think obvious to a lot of people, but does that say something innately? Do you think that says something innately about the person that they have that need? What does it say about you that some part of you wants to rape and pillage, and is it just fantasy, or does it say something about you? Because there are people who have no interest in doing that kind of thing. They always want to be the paladin.
As an outlet, I think it's good.
Sometimes it is. I mean, you can tell if you have somebody in your game who is kind of imbalanced or a little off or off-putting or whatever, and they're always playing that character, that might give you an insight.
The chaotic neutral road.
Right. But if you have someone who is, say, very shy, very inhibited,
and throw them into an evil campaign.
Right, and suddenly, they're like the axe-swinging barbarian who is just always like, maybe that's just their way. That's their safe zone where they can be aggressive and assertive and kind of flip the tables and maybe be the bully for a little while instead of being bullied.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's how I look at it.
A friend of mine, Quentin Dalton, suggests that the game is nothing but escape.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually had a similar conversation with him and brought up the idea of morality in D&D, and he's so certain that it is only fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's played a multitude of characters. He's an experienced gamer, and I think it becomes down to the player whether or not the player allows its character, or the player allows their character to affect them.
Yeah.
And if I started playing D&D in high school when we were still malleable. I mean, adults are malleable to some extent,
right?
But
more so
in high school. And
definitely.
It was a good, virtuous campaign. A couple of hijinks with the chaotic neutral rogue, but
yeah.
We had good intents, and it was heroic.
Yeah.
And I think I took a lot out of the game as a young adult, and I think were it an evil campaign, I think my core would have been a fair amount darker.
When I had my son and he hit 10, 11, 12 years old, he really wanted to play because he knew that his mom played and his mom's friends played. So I ran a game for him and his friends in that age group, and I kept it very PG, they were the heroes. There was no other option. I didn't give them an opportunity to go dark. And even the bad guys were watered down,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of ease them into that whole fantasy thing. Because I think it can make an impression. Now, which do you prefer? I mean, you've played both, right? You've played good guys and bad guys. Do you have a preference?
I have a difficult time playing the evil campaigns.
Really?
Do
you think and see, that is a reflection on you because it's hard for you because you're a nice guy.
Exactly.
He's a really nice guy.
And it was about a year ago, my OG DM, my original DM ran a game with the same chaotic neutral rogue from back when I started when 3rd edition came out.
Mm-hmm.
And the rogue played a Jaren, that's out of the Book of Vile Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And he modeled the Jaren's motives after a Game of Thrones character, the one who made Reek. Are you familiar with him?
Oh, yes.
The one who made Reek. I don't know.
No spoilers, but yes.
So
I
that's
know
enough.
exactly who you're talking about.
And he was flaying people.
And any of you who know Game of Thrones know exactly who he's talking about, too.
And, just going to town. And I played along, and...
That's dark.
Yeah. We started as slaves on a pirate ship.
Yeah.
And we ended up on, essentially, Australia with convicts.
Right.
Fought our way through goblin hordes
Mm-hmm.
to get back to a mainland, wherein we ended up being accosted by the town because we stole somebody's boots, and we were going to take over a vineyard, but it just didn't go well. But I started that game as I do with most of my characters, with a backstory, and backstories you have a little more leniency as far as rules go. You can say, oh, I did that. Nah, I have to roll for that.
Right.
And
you got a little creative freedom, yeah.
I had to ease my way into it because I didn't want to just have a heartless character. And so I was playing a ranger, and the character started off as, defender of the forest and became disillusioned to civilization encroaching, and eventually tried to blow up a quarry to stop the production. And the first humanoid life he took was essentially right before he met the Jaren, which was probably not a good influence for the poor ranger.
Probably not.
And from there on, it was more like I was playing D&D and just going through the motions of making the attack rolls. And actually, I did a pretty sweet gusto thing at that point. There's one point where, and this is just me telling a story about D&D.
So why not, right?
Yeah. There was one point when the Jaren was messing up his intimidation checks against 3 of the other inmates who were sent off with us to find somewhere to go. Because as I said, we were lost on Australia. And I knew the conversation was going awry. So I look at the guy across from me, and he's just standing there with his short sword, with his hand on the sword. And I'm like, I look at the DM, and I'm like, I got this, check this out. And I tell him, I push his hand off of his sword, draw his sword, and then stab him with it. And
that's ballsy.
I rolled an at 20. So the DM was like, all right,
nice.
Done. So I rolled damage and was...
You managed it with finesse even.
And still, it was just the right mechanical move. It wasn't me trying to be evil. It was me looking at the picture, making the decision for the character.
Well, I think that's key too, and I have found this. I will run an evil game or a dark game, whatever you want to call it, if the players are competent. There, to me, is a huge... I prefer lawful evil characters because I find that players can't handle chaotic evil or neutral evil. They take that to mean chaotic stupid is what I call it. It goes to a whole new level. I don't think most bad guys, there are always exceptions, but I don't think most bad guys think of themselves as the bad guys. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, they have their motivations and their reasons, and to them, they're on the right side. It's those self-righteous heroes on the other side who are trying to dictate, and so I think when people go crazy and are like, I'm just gonna, they try to be that old school, tie the broad to the railroad tracks and twist the mustache, evil for evil's sake. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't track.
It's not logical.
Right. If there's a reason for it, Vader, going back to Star Wars, Vader, I think he thought what he was doing was right, and if you go back now and watch the prequels, for him there was a logical sequence to that.
And you see Vader fall, and then he essentially becomes a tool of the Emperor. While he's that tool, he's Vader. He is evil.
Yes.
And then when Luke appears, it brings his heart back.
Yes.
And you see him not recoil. You see him revivify at the end when he throws the Emperor off.
Yes.
Spoiler.
That love, yeah. for everyone who still haven't seen
Return of the Jedi.
But I think it's like actors too. I mean, if I think about Christopher Walken and Steve Buscemi always come to mind because they're both brilliant. But if I didn't know them, and if I saw either one of them walking down the street with their thumb out, there's no way I would pick up either one of them. They're scary looking. They're just creepy. They look like serial killers. They are some of the sweetest people, if you've ever seen interviews with them. And they play some of the most vile, horrible people very convincingly. I don't think that reflects who they are any more than what we're talking about.
There's people who you love to hate. And it becomes a question of, well, it's not even a question. It just becomes you have to disassociate the character from the player, and that's the question, because
he's another one.
Who was that?
Anthony Hopkins.
Oh man, yeah.
Hannibal Lecter.
Scary.
But he didn't think of himself as a bad guy either.
Hannibal did not know. Hannibal thought he was doing great. and this is another D&D story. Sorry.
They're good.
Yeah. My Wednesday game these days. We're 3 sessions in, and we're playing. Actually, there's three. What's the word? Divine characters.
Oh, okay.
And 1 rogue, and we're essentially hunting a necromancer.
Okay.
He's got these skeletons and zombies, so we know he exists. We've seen him. His name is we don't know his name, but he's named one of his skeletons, Trelane, I think. And when we happened upon him in the sanctuary when he was stealing the relic, he was apologetic to the heroes, to our characters. He ordered the zombies essentially to restrain us, but not to attack us, and apologized immensely when he was casting sleep. He was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to do this," and then he very begrudgingly opened his tome and cast sleep and dropped the paladin. But it was it's one of those characters, and this is obviously entirely on the DM of that game. It's one of those characters who obviously believes they're doing the greater good, and you can see it in that particular character, and their means justify their ends, or excuse me, their ends justify their means.
Yeah.
And it's like
I've seen the opposite happen as well. I mean, I had a game where there was a character I was running the game, and one of the characters was a half-drow, who was, a byproduct of his birth. It had nothing to do with any choice he made to be evil or not be evil. And it showcased quite accidentally one of the people. It was a relatively good group of characters, but one of them was like a cleric of Palor. And it showcased how intolerant the extreme good can also be, because on sight this cleric was not going to give this character a chance, because he was
by purely superficial means,
right, because he was half drow and therefore was not, so I have seen it go to that other extreme. In our game right now, didn't you adopt like 2 half-orc children?
That's because I'm awesome.
That's true, but your character is, in fact, of divine origin.
It's a Baryar, which is it's like a centaur, but from a goat.
It's ram.
Ram.
Yeah, it's like a half ram, half man. Yeah, and it's celestial. It's a celestial outsider. But yeah, then he's king of his own kingdom, and he's doing his thing and rocking it out. But he found these 2, the orcs that had lost a battle and raiders, and then all that was left were this little infant and its toddler sibling. And a lot of people playing your character would have slaughtered them, but you didn't, and subsequently it is likely that they will grow up very different from the average orc.
Well, that's something my brother has talked about, and he dips into it on a religious scale. And I hate to bother anybody with this, but I'll say it. If you take children from all over the world, from many different families' faiths, and put them in the same structure, call it a monastery, call it a building, call it whatever you want, and let them exist, and don't necessarily feed them any particular religion, or you can pick one and let it run with that one, that's the one they're going to go to.
Yeah.
So, it's not... we've gone off topic.
Not really.
No. Well, we kind of got into religion, but...
it's not about the origin.
It's not about the origin, it's about the experience. And that's why D&D is so interesting.
Nature versus nurture? Nature
versus nurture is exactly the conversation. Yes. D&D is interesting because the experience is through a filter.
It is.
So you can see the character doing the evil stuff, and you can actively flip that and say, that's evil, that's not the way to go.
Right.
And still have fun with it the context of a game.
Mhm.
But if you don't have that kind of lens and you just play the evil character and you don't look through it as
Yeah.
through proper perspective,
Mhm.
then you're just gaining evil experience.
Yeah.
I-
Well, thank you for coming
These are
by.
delicious.
Awesome. Glad you like them.
Like meat pizzas.
Thanks for coming by and sharing your thoughts and your insights. And yeah, I'm gonna have to have you and Matt, and I'll just host and let them kind of go off on their tangents about time travel and Doctor Who, and I'll ask questions and represent the common folk who doesn't know how these things work. Next time I think my cousin is coming
Yep.
to speak. Yeah, she's going to talk about her music. She sings and plays instruments, and
Sounds good.
Jessica. So that should be very cool.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. It was great having you.
Thank you.